Now before we start, I want you to take a look at your bookshelf. There are probably a lot of books on there, some of them you've never ever read, and as we're investing more time into technology, into distractions, and into endless streams of procrastination, there's a really good chance that you're going to be thinking to yourself, how in the world am I going to dig through all of the books on my shelf? Reading takes up a lot of time, and we all have this idea in our heads of reading being this very hermetic activity, where you got to lock yourself in a room for hours on end and shut yourself away from the rest of the universe in order to get some good reading in. So what you read here doesn't really matter, because there are simply too many good books out there. You might want to read that treatise on the origins of species, you might want to read the essays by Michel de Montaigne, or you might simply settle for Descartes' Meditations. These are all great books for sure, but having this idea of being some hermetic person just to read could actually be kind of counterproductive. Because if you think about it, the more that you insist upon this idea of that you have to lock yourself away from a room for hours on end to read, the bigger the goal becomes. And the bigger and the scarier the goal becomes, the less likely that you're actually going to do the reading. Nowadays, we really have the concentration nor the freedom to really dive that deeply into books. So thereby, by conjuring up this really giant thing in your head, by conjuring up this fantasy, it's actually going to drive you away from reading instead of driving you toward it. We need to stop fearing the boogeyman and to actually get some decent reading in. In my opinion, how much you read on a daily basis actually doesn't matter that much. Whereas consistency, on the other hand, which I've talked about before in other videos of mine, is much more important. It is way better if you read 20 pages a day and sustain that over the coming months than if you read 200 pages a day and completely burn yourself out. You need to get to a point where you don't even have to think about reading. It just happens. It needs to become a part of you. Reading needs to be a part of your daily routine. Science fiction writer Ray Bradbury had a really brilliant tip. For the next 1,000 nights, before you go to bed every night, read one short story. That'll take you 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And read one poem a night from the vast history of poetry. Go back and read Shakespeare, read Alexander Pope, read Robert Frost. But one poem a night, one short story a night, one essay a night for the next 1,000 nights. The beauty of this tip is that everyone can do it. You totally can spare 15 minutes to read one little short poem and a short story before you go to bed every night. It really takes the excuse and the fear out of the equation. You can sit down and do it before you go to bed, enjoy the story, enjoy the poem, and then bugger off to bed. And it's really important to point out that Ray Bradbury suggested that we read from multiple pursuits of disciplines. One short story, one poem, and one essay. What this does is that it builds up a requisite variety within you. It prevents you from getting bored from just reading one book for the entire duration of this month. It could also build these very unique connections in your head if you read from multiple pursuits of disciplines. The more exposure to different fields that you have, for example, you read an article from Cosmos before you go to bed, and you read one poem from William Shakespeare, and you read one Hemingway short story, at some point all those points of references are going to start to integrate together, and then you're going to have this really beautiful understanding, this interdisciplinary understanding of literature, of poetry, and of contemporary science. Personally, my reading habits are a little bit different from Ray Bradbury's advice. I typically like to read nonfiction or university reading or hard fiction first thing in the morning over a cup of tea, so that my mind is really clear and I can sort of make sure that whatever I'm reading, I'm giving it 1,000% concentration. And before I go to bed, I typically whip out a short story here and there, or read a chapter from a fictional work that I like. And to finish it all off, I'll read one random poem from a collection on my shelf. Let it be Allen Ginsberg, let it be T.S. Eliot, let it be William Shakespeare, let it be William Wordsworth, anything. Read one poem every single night. Poems are really short, and then after 2 to 3 months, you come back to your progress, you take a look at all the stuff that you've read. What's going to start to happen is that that elusive idea is no longer there. Reading is no longer scary. Reading is no longer this giant monster that you have to tackle. From that point, something really powerful happens. Now, because you've got the base habit of 15 minutes a day down, you can then build on top of that and to turn yourself into a very prolific reader. And that's really how prolific readers were made. When they were younger, they read a bit here and there, and then the more that they've read, the more that they fall in love with reading, and by the time they turn 20 or 22, 23, they will just become excellent readers, reading everything from Shakespeare to the Romantics to, anything that you throw at them. And that's the vision that I want for you. Reading prolifically doesn't have to be scary. That's all I have for this week. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, I would recommend that you do so to keep yourself up to date with all the goodies coming at you